Greetings and salutations to all you folks out there. This is going to be something a little bit different. I am starting a tutorial series. This is going to be a brief overview of the stats and uses for all of the units in Forged Alliance. This is going to take me several weeks to get done. Do not expect regular entries, but this is going to be the first one, and hopefully it will be useful to all of you. I'm going to cover the Tech 1 land units for all 4 factions. This is going to be fast. This is going to be a little bit chopped up. You may have to jump around to different points to review units that you want to hear about more in depth, but I'm going to get it out as quickly as I possibly can to condense this video. Going to keep it under 15 minutes. All right, Tech 1 land is probably the set of units that you're going to see most of all the units in this game. Tech 1 land affects just about every single map except for 81Ks, which no one really plays. You're going to use these in pairing with your ACU to fight just about every fight ever, and a lot of your 1 versus 1s, especially in the 5K maps, are going to be decided with Tech 1 units. You need to be very familiar with these, and they are incredibly diverse between the factions, more so than you would think. And this is just going to run over real quickly all of the differences and the little ins and outs of these units, and hopefully you will be able to handle them better after this is over. First up, we are going to look at the scouts. Scouts are vital. Scouts must be built. Intel is incredibly important in this game. You'd never want to be surprised. And you can't have radar coverage and air scouts everywhere. Land scouts, especially in the early game, give you a little leg up in giving you radar coverage in certain areas where you have your tanks. First up, we're going to look at the Selen. This is the Seraphim Tech 1 Scout. It also doubles as their light assault bot. Seraphim does not have a light assault bot. Selen is essentially half of a lab. They cost the most mass at 20, do 13 damage, have 35 health. So that is kind of a unique unit for Seraphim. Aeon Scouts have hover. This is very important because they are paired with Auroras, which can also hover. That means Auroras can keep their radar with them when crossing water. It is an essential ability and a huge plus. Moving on to UEF. UEF follows the faction doctrine in that it has more health, 29 health as opposed to the Spirit's 20, and it has 2 damage per second, but it does cost a little more. None of those stats really matter too terribly much at the end of it all because it is a scout. So, yeah, there you go. Cybrans are a bit different. They actually have cloak. They have very little health at 15. They only cost 8 mass, which is dirt cheap. But we're going to discuss a little bit about cloaking and stealth. Stealth makes you invisible to radar. Cloak makes you invisible to visual radius. So you cannot actually shoot a mole that has cloak enabled unless you have radar or omni coverage on it. This means you can stick it in back corners of the map and get free intel for long periods of time. Very handy. These are the Tech 1 tanks. All 4 factions have a Tech 1 tank except Cybern, which has a light assault bot, or an assault bot, and it is essentially the same thing. This is what you are going to be using for all of your combat situations. This is probably the single most produced unit in this entire game. They're pretty diverse though, so I'm going to run through some statistics. First up is the THAM. This is the Seraphim Tech 1 tank, very similar to the UEF tank. It is 1/10 point faster. It is slightly more front-loaded with about the same damage, 20 less health, and it costs 54 mass. Nothing really spectacular about this tank. It's a main battle tank. You can say the same things about it as you can about the Striker. This is the UEF tank. It is 24 damage per second, same as the Seraphim. And it costs 2 more mass, 56, but it does have 300 health. And it is slightly slower, 3.4 speed versus 3.5 for the Seraphim. Again, there's just two plain run-of-the-mill main battle tanks. Nothing incredibly special about them. Next up, we have the Aeon tank. This is the Aurora. Lots of interesting stuff about this one. Long range, half the health of the other tanks, only 140 health. It does have high damage, 26.7, very front-loaded, and you want to kite with this unit. You also want to have radar because the actual range is longer than the vision range. So if you do not have radar coverage, it puts you in a melee situation, which you will lose. Cybern tank is the Mantis. Cheap on mass, expensive on power, 27 damage per second, 270 health, screaming fast. Aeon is the slowest tank by far. Cybern is the fastest tank by far. 3.7, amazing at rating. However, it does have a slow turret turn speed, which means that traveling in a straight line, it can shoot fine, but when you're dodging and weaving, it has a little trouble keeping up. And it has a very high fire rate, which has an odd distribution of damage. So the Mantis does not do as well in large frontal assaults as it does in run-bys and raiding. Now here, we're going to see a little comparison of the speed of the tanks. Just going to start them all in a line, run to the other side of this landmass, and you can easily see what I'm talking about with the speed advantages and disadvantages. Already falling far behind 3.1 speed is the Aurora. So slow, you have to kite effectively, but it can be run down. The Aurora is powerful, but it can be defeated. So you can see it falling behind there. Then you have the Tham and the Striker, which are essentially the same. The Tham is pulling ever so slightly ahead. And then the Mantis far ahead of both of them. The Mantis can skirt and outrun the other Tech 1 tanks, especially the Aurora. Very effective raiding unit. So you can see what people talk about when they talk about the differences in the tanks right there. Next up, we're going to look at the Tech 1 Mobile Artillery. This is what you're going to use to kill point defense, use them for area denial or range damage on groups of units. They generally have fairly high damage, but they're a little bit slow and they have low health, so mix them in with your tanks and you just got to play with the ratios. We have the Cybern tank. The Cybern RD, the Medusa, has a special ability, EMP Blast. It does stun units that it does not kill. Therefore, it is very useful into the higher tech levels because even though it can't kill Tech 2 units, it can stun them. Incredibly useful ability. However, it does have very low damage. Only 38 DPS. Compare that to the Seraphim tank, the subject of many a balanced discussion. This thing costs a whopping 54 mass. That is 50% more than the other tanks at 36. So you get twice as many other artillery, not tanks, artillery, as you do the Seraphim. This thing has 93 damage per second, fires once per 3 seconds for 270 damage per hit. It does hover. It is an amazing tool, but it is expensive. So that is the balancing out. You gotta pay attention to the mass cost because for 10 of the Sarah Arty, you can have 15 of the others. So you gotta kind of balance that into the equation. UEF Arty sucks versus units. Slow firing speed, only fires once every 8 seconds, but it does 500 damage. Huge alpha strike. And it has one area of effect. Plus it has an oversight ability. When a shell comes down on an area, you get visual contact with that area for a couple of seconds. So it gives you a little bit of intel. Something I didn't say before, the Medusa also has a slow firing rate once per 6 seconds. So the Medusa, high area of effect, bad accuracy, stun effect, bad base wrecker, good versus units. So the Cybern is versus units. Sarah and UEF are more towards base destruction. Aeon, 100% base destruction. It does a whopping 100 damage per second, one shot per 2 seconds for 200 damage. No area of effect, but it is a powerhouse. This thing demolishes bases very quickly. With its high fire rate, it doesn't overkill as much, and it just lays down enormous amounts of damage. So base wrecking potential, I'd have to say the Aeon has it. Overall versatility, probably Seraphim, but it is more expensive. Now here we are going to see how the RD stack up. I have 4-point defense, all 4 RD. They're firing on different ones. You're going to see how the Aeon, pinpoint precise, takes out its PD quickly and efficiently, but no area of effect. The Medusa for Cybern, basically doing no damage against the point defense. I mean, it sucks. UEF, also bad because of its low accuracy, but the Alpha Strike is good. It is going to take down its PD fairly quickly. And then the Seraphim is kind of in between the Aeon and the UEF. It does its job really well. It does it pretty effectively, but it does cost 50% more. So you've got to factor that in. You're paying 50% more basically for the ability to hover. Next up, we're going to go over the anti-air units. Now, these are essentially the same. It will be easier to tell you what's different. All 4, except for the Aeon, do 16 damage per second. The Aeon does 15, but the trade-off for that is it has the highest speed. It can run down air units better. It has 3 speed. So all of the other anti-air have 16 damage per second. Now, the only oddball is the Cybern anti-air. The Cybern anti-air is very strange. It cannot kill air scouts very well because it has incredibly slow tracking projectiles. The projectiles actually die before they reach the target. But they can kill interceptors okay-ish, although they do tend to overkill because, again, the slow projectile speed, it fires too many before it retargets. And you'll see that in just a second here. Now, the other special thing about the Cybern anti-air is that it does have a ground fire toggle. You can fire on ground units. It is non-tracking, so it's not that useful against units, but it does have some limited capacity to defend itself, although it is horribly inaccurate. And then you're going to see it swap back and watch this very, very slow, lazy projectile speed kind of just trailing up. And then literally has a hard time hitting the broadside of a factory. You can see it has shots shooting high. It has shots going into the ground in front. Just really bad accuracy. Last up, we have the labs. The Hunter and the Flare for Cybern and Aeon are essentially the same. The only lab that is different and significantly stronger, they all cost the same amount of mass, they all have the same run speed. The Mech Marine for UEF has extra health, 75 as opposed to 70 and 65 for the other 2 factions, and 2 more damage per second, 23 versus 21 for the other 2. Now that is going to give UEF a leg up in the next topic that we have to talk about. That is the Ghetto Gunship, otherwise known as a transport full of light assault bots. We're going to see that right here. These light assault bots, you can load them into an air transport, and then they will fire from the transport. They're the only unit that can do that. Tech 2 transports work best for this because they do have ground firing weapons. You can use them to target, and the labs will assist the ground fire target. If you want to use a Tech 1 transport for this, there's no targeting mechanism. You basically just have to manually hover around over what you want to kill, and the 6 labs will fire downwards and obliterate whatever is underneath the transport. Alrighty guys, that's going to wrap up this quick overview. Please forward this to people who are curious about the units. This is as concise as I can make it and as informative as I can make it. So hopefully this will fix the gap in information. Alrighty guys, I will see you later.